Evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us at the special council meeting held July 31st, 2023. Call the council meeting to order. Councillor Jason Mady is not here yet, but I think he is on his way. We acknowledge that this land is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of the First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi peoples, and of the Huron-Wyandot people. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and of all the original peoples of Turtle Island who have been living and working on this time immemorial. Any declarations of conflicts of interest for members of council? Seeing none, I will need adoption of the published agenda for this evening. We are going to have just an amendment that Corrine Chasen is here instead of Mr. Bohr. So looking for a mover and a seconder for the published agenda. Deputy Mayor Shepley, supported by Councillor McGuire-Blaise. Any questions on that? Seeing none, all in favor, and that is carried unanimously. We will go to reports from administration. And before we go to Mr. Bohr, our manager of planning services, or sorry, on here. Ms. Chasen, we will go to Director Chadwick.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi, and good afternoon, Council. The purpose of tonight's special meeting is to provide Council as well as the public with information surrounding a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment at 199 Irwin Ave. In summary, the applicant is seeking to construct 2 semi-detached dwellings in a pre-existing R1 zoning district, which only permits single detached dwellings by right. As Mayor Bondi indicated, Corrine Chasen, our senior planner in the Planning Services Division, will be leading the presentation this afternoon and will walk everyone through the proposal, its merits, and any public or agency feedback we've received thus far. But to highlight what Ms. Chasen will be presenting, the proposal is considered a gentle intensification of an infill property with existing services in a walkable community. For these reasons, please place special attention or pay special attention to slides 16 through 19 for policy matters that must be considered when faced with these types of applications. Lastly, as a friendly reminder, Council should not make any decisions tonight. Instead, the proposed amending bylaw will be before you on the August 14th regular Council agenda for your decision making. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Chadwick. Thank you, Ms. Mayor. What we have before us, as Ms. Chadwick has explained, we have a site-specific zoning amendment before you. The property address is 199 Irwin Avenue, and the applicants that are with us today are Mr. Brad and Jewel Iserman, as well as Mr. Greg Iserman. Next slide, please. And just to recap what Director Chadwick had mentioned, and for the purposes of the public, Council hears the applications today, and they do not make a decision on this application at this time. A decision will occur at a later time after a council report is completed, and information, anything raised at this meeting will then be considered in that report. Next slide, please. So today's meeting is to hear 2 applications for site-specific zoning amendment. That's ZBA 0323 and ZBA 0423. And these are 2 applications that deal with currently a one property, which has been divided into 2 parts. Next slide, please. So the proposed applications fall on this property that's shown here as the red star on the property here. It's in Ward 1. And 199 Irwin is located right at the very top. You can see that there. The property is designated residential in the official plan and zoned residential R1.1 for low density residential use. That's typically single detached dwellings. This property received a recent severance application from the Committee of Adjustment, which divided 199 Irwin Avenue into 2 equal parts, or 2 equal lots. The dimensions of that lot are now divided into a width of 67.25 feet and by a depth of 138.3 feet for a total lot area of 9,300 square feet each. Next slide, please. Here's a scaled-in map showing the location of 199 Irwin Avenue. That's in dark gray. Items to point out on this map are the close proximity to main intersections of County Road 34, which is a Main Street, Essex. That's our main street, and the County Road 23 or the Gosfield-Arner Town Line. And you can see in this neighborhood layout plan, all of the neighboring lots and their lot configurations. And you can see the size in comparison to the lot in gray. Next slide, please. Further zooming in, you'll notice the property outlined here in blue. This air photo shows the previous house that was located on 199 Irwin Avenue. This house has now been removed and the site is now vacant. You'll notice that the west and east sides of the property have residential dwellings, and that's on Irwin Ave and on County Road 23. And on the north side, you'll see a multi-unit townhouse development. And on the south side, you'll see just the corner of a 10-unit apartment complex known as Amador Apartments. You'll see a parking lot also on the left-hand side. And that is, just to give you some proximity, location to our Foodland grocery store. Next slide, please. So recently this year, the applicants obtained approval through the Committee of Adjustment to sever the subject lands. And you can see that here in the reference plan into 2 equal parts. So we're going to refer to them as part 1 in yellow and part 2 in the orange. So reminder, each one of these is 9,300 square feet. Minimum lot size for residential R1.1 property is 5,000 square feet, just to give you a little bit of a comparison. And these lots were approved by the Committee of Adjustment because they satisfied the official plan severance policies. There were no objections from internal departments, external agencies, or the public on these severances. Next slide, please. This key map identifies the zoning of the property shown with the blue star. Yellow area represents residential. The red area identifies the commercial district of the downtown and Main Street. The gray areas, those are your schools, town-owned facilities, and the churches. So this slide should give you an idea of close distance to amenities and the downtown area. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we're going to show you the street view and what the property currently looks like. So the house has been removed. So in here, you can see my Jeep parked on the corner there. That's the extent on one side. And then the fence area on the opposite side is where the limit of the property lies. Now the backside of the building, or the backside of a building that you're seeing there in the top picture, that is actually the backside of the townhouse development. And that's the north neighboring property. The bottom photo is the Amador Apartments that I mentioned. It's a 10-plex. It's located directly opposite of the street from the subject property. The bottom 2 photos there that I'm showing is just a quick shot of the neighboring properties on either side of the subject lands, and they are single-family detached. Next slide, please. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to be talking about what the actual proposed changes or zoning changes are. That's before us today. Next slide. So the applicants are proposing a site-specific amendment to allow the construction of a semi-detached residential dwelling on each one of the newly created lots from that 199 Irwin. Because there are now 2 lots, that is why there are 2 identical zoning amendment applications. The proposed semi-detached dwellings will be identical in design and in footprint. The current zoning of 199 Irwin is residential R1.1, which only permits, as of right, the construction of a single detached dwelling unit with the option of a second dwelling unit either within the main dwelling or within an accessory structure. For council and the public's information, in accordance with the definitions in the zoning bylaw, a dwelling unit is defined as a room or suite of rooms for use by one or more individuals as an independent and separate housekeeping unit. A semi-detached means one dwelling divided vertically into 2 dwellings by a common interior wall. I usually like to tell people it's 2 houses stuck together with a common wall or attached at the hip. Further, the typical provision for a semi-detached dwelling lot is usually and typically 60 feet in width. These 2 lots, as I've mentioned, is 67.25 feet in width. So that therefore satisfies the typical requirement. In accordance with the Town of Essex recent changes to the zoning bylaw, as well as the Ontario Government Bill 23 changes, second dwelling units are permitted within main dwellings. Therefore, each second detached unit could be permitted within the basement for a total in a semi-detached dwelling of 4 units each. That's 2 on the main floor, 2 in the basement. Next slide, please. So here's the design proposal for the 2 new lots submitted by the applicants. You can see the layout of the semi-detached dwelling units situated on the property. So a couple items here to point out. There's a large dotted line that shows the approximate building envelope in accordance with the zoning bylaw. So keep that in mind. What you're going to see, though, is that the entirety of both proposed semi-detached dwellings, they fit adequately within that building envelope. Lot coverage in the R1.1 zone is a maximum of 40%. So the proposal that you have before you on each one of those lots has a total coverage of 28.9%, which satisfies the bylaw provision. You will notice that the rear yard deck and the stairs bump out just past that dotted line that I'm mentioning. That is okay, because the zoning bylaw does allow some encroachment for decks and stairs into the required yard, and therefore this proposal satisfies these provisions. And the owners have also shown driveway access. They've also shown attached garages and the proposed parking areas. This design satisfies the minimum required parking spaces and also adds 2 additional parking spaces above our zoning bylaw requirement. Next slide, please. So in here, you can see the elevations that were submitted. Top left, front elevation. The bottom is the rear elevation. And you can see the below grade entrances for the basement dwelling units here. And then the top right, shows the side view with the back decks coming out from the rear, as well as the stairs and the below grade entrances and the windows. Next slide, please. So the site-specific zoning amendments that the applicants are asking relief from today are for the following 2 items listed here. So the first one is relief from section 14.1A, which only allows for the construction of a single detached dwelling unit, a new one. New semi-detached or duplexes are not permitted as of right, and therefore must be evaluated and granted relief from council. The second item is for relief from section 14.1B, which states that the minimum lot width for a single detached dwelling is typically 50 feet. That's for a single detached dwelling, 50 feet. A semi-detached dwelling is not permitted as of right, therefore no prescription for a lot width is described in the R1.1 zone. So therefore relief is being asked today to recognize these 2 lots of being 67.25 feet in width for these semi-detached dwellings. Now the typical is usually listed in the other zoning requirements for residential. It's usually 60 feet. So this would satisfy it. Next slide, please. So in the next slides, we're going to speak about the policy considerations when evaluating and making a decision on these applications. Next slide. So when council is making a decision on zoning amendments, you must first review the policies of the provincial policy statement, or the PPS. And let's run through these. So section 1.4.1 promotes a mix of housing options, densities, to meet future needs and residents through the intensification of redevelopment that optimize resources, infrastructure, and public amenities. What you're going to notice through the next couple of slides is there is some repetitiveness, because everything that we have for the official plan and the county official plan and the Town of Essex official plan are going to fall in line with the PPS here. Okay, so you're going to notice some similarities. The next one states that permits and facilitates all housing types to meet social health, economic accessibility for all demographics. This includes affordable to low and moderate income households with a range of housing options, including affordable units in settlement areas and near downtown core areas. All things that I've highlighted that this property is near. It also encourages compact, increased density development options that promotes walkable, livable, and resilient communities. And lastly, it says it supports residential intensification on full municipal services. This is an urban area. It has potable water, storm, and sanitary sewer capacity. Next slide, please. Again, in these slides, look for the similarities. County of Essex official plan. It states in primary settlement areas, which this is, again, compact density, residential intensification, mixed uses, pedestrian oriented, and a broad range of housing types, services, and shared amenity areas. The next item talks about it shall have full municipal sewage services and water and so forth with stormwater management. And it also states a range of land uses and densities for a healthy mixture of housing types. Again, this is a proposal that will allow for several units to be in one, where we can share accommodations, amenity areas, and is in walking distance. And the county also notes that 15% of all new residential development within each local municipality occurs by way of residential intensification redevelopment. And lastly, the county generally permits second dwelling units within all single, detached, semi-detached, and townhouse dwelling units. Next slide, please. So running through, now on to our Town of Essex official plan. Again, compact development, fully serviced areas, broad range of housing forms, rentals as opposed to ownership, all within the settlement areas to prevent or to promote vibrant walkable neighborhoods. It recognizes town centers and settlement areas are dynamic in nature and need to change over time. So depending on the market conditions and what the needs are for the residents. It promotes increases in density near the core areas. This is only about a block away from Main Street and walkable distance, and encourages infilling, residential intensification, housing rehabilitation, renovation in older neighborhoods. So lots of commonalities there. Next slide, please. So here's the recap. So when you're evaluating these applications, for this one here, I'm going to note on a few points. So the Committee of Adjustment just approved this severance application, and the owners were completely transparent in what their intentions were. And when we circulated for that application, we did not receive any objections. It did satisfy the requirements of the official plan. Now, the two identical residential lots can satisfy all of the size requirements, all of the setbacks, and deal with the lot coverage. They're well within that measure, and also satisfies the parking provisions in accordance with our requirements. Infill lots are encouraged in the official plan and alleviate housing needs. There is a steady demand for attainable dwelling units and for different housing types other than single detached dwellings. The Irwin Avenue neighborhood is well established. It's made up of single detached dwellings, multi-units, as well as some semi-detached in the neighborhood. Each semi-detached dwelling will contain 4 dwelling units. Zoning bylaw requires 1 parking space per dwelling unit. Therefore, a ratio of 1 to 1. Therefore, 4 parking spaces are required for each unit. 2 spaces are accommodated in the attached garages, and 2 spaces are located in the driveways. There is an additional room in the driveway to actually add maybe 2 more additional tandem spaces, because currently right now, our zoning bylaw does not limit the amount of area that a cement driveway or paved driveway can be. So there is a potential to bump out that area even further if needed. Amenity areas have been designed for all units, which are comprised of a rear deck as well as the backyard area. Next slide, please. So in the next slide, we will speak to the circulation process and the comments that we received. Next slide. So as per the Planning Act, these applications were circulated to internal departments and external agencies, and we received the following notation. Infrastructure services, just basically stated, each unit must be water metered. Development services stated that they have no objection. Essex Region Conservation Authority sent us no objections as well. Next slide, please. So also, as per the Planning Act, we are obligated to circulate all properties within 120 meters of the subject lands. And you can see that this radius is overlaid on the key map here, shown in blue. And we received 2 inquiries from the public as of last week. And Madam Mayor, I'm also been informed that we did receive another commentary, and the resident is here today and he will present that information. Next slide, please. I'll talk about the items that we received last week. So we had a resident that was within 120 meters state the following. They asked the question, where will the tenants park? Two semi-detached units will need 16 spaces if 2 people live in each unit. We informed that resident that of the requirements of the zoning bylaw with the 1-to-1 ratio. And we also identified that there were additional parking spaces that were provided by the design. The next resident stated that they had concerns regarding parking overflowing onto the street. So Irwin Avenue is a narrow road and there is a gravel shoulder on either side of it. There is a trend that some residents do park along on the gravel shoulder within the right of way. One of the concerns that was raised was that Irwin Avenue, the section of Irwin Avenue, acts as a bit of a shortcut so that people can avoid going to the stoplight at County Road 34 and County Road 23. So I have seen this happen. People do travel fairly quickly down Irwin Avenue. And the resident had the concerns that if there is parking that is along the gravel shoulders, that may cause a more precarious situation. So they just wanted to bring that to the attention of council tonight, but they were not able to attend tonight to speak on that. So that follows up with the public comments. And again, Madam Mayor, there is some delegates here that wish to speak on that. Next slide, please. So in the next slide, we'll just talk about the next steps towards a decision from council on these applications. Next slide. So following tonight's discussion, a report to council will be prepared and submitted for the next available regular council meeting, which is August 14th. At the meeting, council may do one of the following. You can approve the proposed application with or without conditions, and administration will send notice of the 20-day appeal period. You can deny the application stating reasons, whereas administration will again send notice of the 20-day appeal period, or you can defer the application to a later date if more information is required to make a decision. So at this point, Madam Mayor, this concludes my presentation, and I'm here to answer any questions. We also have the members of the Eisman family here that can also answer any questions for council. Thank you.
Very much. Before we go to comments from members of council, I'd like to open it up to the delegate that was here. If the delegate would like to speak, I'm not sure which one would like to speak. Please go back, sir, to the delegate stand and click on your mic. And can you say your name and your address, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Scott Brady. I live at 215 Irwin, adjacent 199. There's a driveway to Condo Corporation 83 in between me and the Irismans. I moved back to Essex in 2008. I've owned 3 properties, and this is the 3rd time I have to appear before a zoning committee. I lived on Hanlon, and all the stuff went in before and behind me. Perfect. Presently, my wife and I own Harrow Dental. My wife is Dr. Christine Brady, so we own property in Harrow. Zoning committee application right beside me. This is the 3rd time. I moved to Irwin 3 years ago. Love it. I encourage this happening. However, in the 3 years I've lived on Irwin, some things have arisen. I'm going to go, I apologize. I misspelled Corinne's last name. She did not get my email. She forwarded today. It'll be attached to all of you. So I'm going to, I don't know if you can put this up there or I'll just read from it. Okay, I'll just read from it. My wife and I, Christine and I, are very glad to see a new building at 199. We look forward to it, adding to the neighborhood. However, we have a few concerns we'd like to talk about. The potential parking issues and its fit in the neighborhood. I have 3 points. The neighborhood contains 2 properties with multi-residential use, a Medora across with 10 single units and 216 Condo Corporation 83 with 10 2-bedroom units, semi-detached. each of them with adequate parking. Amadora across has 12 parking, and they have overflow parking with Essex Dental when visitors arise on weekends and evenings. Essex Condo Corporation 83, which is beside me, wraps around 199 Irwin, has 10 units with 3 or 4 parking spots per unit. And each unit has 3 or 4 cars. And I've sit and can look through my fence and open my gate and see them come and go. They go right by my front door every day. Plenty of parking. 199, I think, is very underserviced. Your zoning bylaw of 1 car per unit for a total of 8 is completely underwhelming in a residential environment like this. I'm going to pause and think to the houses behind Canadian Tire. I'm not sure what the official name of that is. The parking, the street parking there, it's packed. There's not enough parking. I don't think parking in these situations are thought through completely. Sorry, flipping my page. The proposed semi-detached dwelling at 199 with a total of 8 2-bedroom units will not have adequate parking for 8 to 16 cars. 8 units, 1 person per unit, 1 car. Someone wants to get out of the driveway with 2 cars behind, they got to go knock on a door. We know the logistics of that aren't correct. Okay. I don't think there's enough parking on the site. Point number 2. The Brockman Hayes unit at 223 Talbot is the exact same layout. So from 199 Irwin, go to the physiotherapy center on Talbot Street, kitty corner to, what is that? The Goodwill donation place. Rich Brockman and Kirk Hayes own 2 units, semi-detached with the exact same layout. The reason I know this, my brother built those. My brother's building the Eisermans for Brady Homes, or I'm not sure what the deal is. I know that he's doing it. I have the site plan from him many years ago, or many time ago. I'd encourage you all to go and look at 223 and look and stand in the front driveway and look at that. 4 single car garages. The site plan I got from my brother has the driveways, what I call garage width. You go to 223, they have the driveway building width for 4 parking lanes on 1 unit, 4 parking lanes on the other. So there's a total of 10 or 4 plus 8, 12 parking spaces there. So each unit gets a lane, gets 2 parking spaces. That allows for extra parking right on site. The comparison from the Brockman Hayes, and there had to be a zoning bylaw amendment for that lot also, in conversations with my brother Kevin, to go through, and I don't know if the driveways were done out of spec, whatever. I don't know. I don't know all the answers there. I know having a conversation with Rich Brockman at the end of his driveway. I'm good friends with Rich. I'm good friends with Pauline. I grew up with both of them. He stood in my brother's wedding. Put this to the Eisermans at 199. It's not the same amount of parking. And there's no fences. There's a fence to the west on 199, so you can't overflow and squeeze in there. And I know for a fact that at Brockman Hayes, when there's visitor parking, they go and park in the municipal lot across the way. They go and park in the physiotherapy office whenever they need to. They don't ask. Bringing to my next point. At Irwin, on Irwin, street parking has been a problem. Last year, almost a year to the day, it was August 8th. I was leaving on a vacation. Bulldozers and trucks rolled in, started putting a sidewalk down Irwin. And it changed the parking because you used to be able to park in the front of our big long lots at the front of them for overflow parking. Now they put a sidewalk there on our side of the road, up, I don't know if it's the west, the north, whatever you want to call it. And it's changed the parking, overflow parking on the street for all of the residents. My driveway fits 8 cars. It's 100 feet long, 130 feet long. It's not an issue. My 18 and a 20-year-old son, they have their friends over, they can park in my driveway. If they need overflow parking, they use my neighbor's driveway, Rich Schroeder. 199 Irwin, I know where they're going to be parking. They're going to be parking in front of my house. And now, everybody here, you don't live on Irwin. I don't think anybody lives on Irwin. I think Corinne lives on the backside of Irwin. And there is a problem right now on Irwin with one of the houses about 7 or 8 from me, where they have young adolescent males over there continually till 2, 3 in the morning. And there's been police presence, and there's been cops called, and there's been incidents with neighbors and OPP. And if there's not adequate parking on my side of the street, at my end, this is going to happen here. And I don't think at 199, they're going to have families with 7 kids and 14 cars and all of this, but this could happen. I want you to put yourself in my position, sitting right beside this and thinking of the parking extrapolated 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now.
Mr. Beatty, I think you said you had 3 issues. We heard about the parking. Is there 2?
The parking on Amador, the 2 residents right beside us, the Hayes, Brockman, and now the street parking in front of us. That was my 3. It's outlined in my email that I screwed up sending. My apologies. The last point, my last point is the fit in the neighborhood. We welcome responsible development at 199 that includes adequate street parking for both tenant and visitors, and that does not need to further on-street parking issues that will especially impact us at 215 Irwin, as we are the closest neighbors. Perhaps a new site plan that includes a wider, longer driveway, similar to 223 Talbot. That would be a good starting point. And also make multiple residential buildings more, well, if you add more parking, it will be more attractive to renters or to potential tenants, and therefore you can drive the rent wherever you need to be. My wife and I sat and we've had this discussion, and we've met the Eisermans many times. This is my only venue to publicly share my point and where I live. And I bought the house and then put lots and lots of things in there.
Okay.
I'm done, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brady. Your comments are received, and we will get your email too.
Thank you.
Okay. Just press off on your mic, and Director Chadwick.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. We just wanted to clarify some of the concerns in terms of your decision-making down the road when you're faced with this amending bylaw. So council is faced with an amending bylaw for the land use, meaning semi-detached. So the decision before you will be whether or not to approve a change in adding an additional use to R1, not a change in terms of not meeting the bylaw for parking. So to confirm or to reiterate what Ms. Chason had said earlier, the parking requirement has been met. Not only has it been met, but it's actually been exceeded. So I wanted to just share that with you or reiterate. The proponent is actually proposing 1.5 units, parking spaces per unit for a total of 12. And in fact, there's actually room for 4 additional spaces within the right of way, but on the property itself, 1.5 spaces are being proposed, which could actually end up being 2 spaces per unit for a total of 16. So 12 for sure on property. In addition to that, not only could some spaces be in tandem? But Ms. Chason indicated earlier something about there is no current regulation that prohibits the amount of surface area for a driveway. So if you were to visualize side-by-side parking, for example, if the width of the driveway meets our development standards, the developer at this point in time could potentially go wider and choose to have a little bit more width in the front yard for additional parking, thereby increasing the number on the property itself and not having to rely on the shoulder. In reference to a comment related to visitor parking is not a requirement for semi-detached dwellings. And just as a reminder, these are freehold for sale and ownership, and that they're not considered for rent or a multi-residential complex, which would require visitor parking. So just as that reminder, council's decision should be based solely on policymaking and for the change in land use, not for any variances in parking, because it meets and exceeds the parking requirement.
Any comments, questions from members of council to our administration or to the proponents? Councillor Hammond.
I too have concerns about parking. I think our requirements are too low. A two-bedroom place has obviously a potential for 2 cars, if not more. I've lived in a cul-de-sac before, and you get a couple kids start driving and guess where they're parking. I'd like to see more parking, and I'd like to see an amendment to our parking requirements, because they're definitely not as high as they should be.
Then Councillor McGuire, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to be honest. When I went over this afternoon, I liked everything about it, but I did have concerns about the parking. And I do recognize, as Director Chadwick said, that it meets the minimum requirement and maybe even a little more. But I can't, in 5 years, I've heard this issue over and over. We face problems with not enough parking and parking infractions. And to be honest, I have 5 grown kids. If you have a house with 2 bed, you need 2 or 3 working people now to pay the bills and in a home. And so, I mean, each one of those units is going to require space for at least 2 or 3. I hope that I loved everything about this, and it's nice to hear from Ms. Chason that there is the ability to change the parking plan and allow for a little more. So I hope you'll seriously take that into consideration, because this is really exciting, and I liked everything about it, but I had concerns before our delegate came before us about the amount of parking.
Councillor McGuire Blaze, then Deputy Mayor Shepley.
Thank you through the chair. I don't have a concern with parking. 1.5 is, I think, more than enough. I think if our council has a problem with the amount of parking spaces, we need to change our parking bylaw. And that is something separate than this. So for me, 223 County Road 34, I have never had a complaint there. I know 2 people who live there, and they have no problems with the way their parking is situated. And those are the buildings that our delegate had referenced before that are just around the corner here. I think this is a great use of the property. It does exactly what we're looking to do. It fits the town's idea of growth. It also fits the province's idea of growth. So I like all of that. And the road currently allows for parking on the street. If there was no parking on the street allowed, I think then maybe we would have an issue. But at the moment, it's free parking on the street. So I have people parking in front of my house on a daily basis, and there's only my house and another house. But I still have vehicles parked in front of my home. I'm not asking town to come and change the laws because my neighbor's kids are parking on the street. I mean, it's free. It's public parking. So I think this is great, and I'm all for it. Thanks.
Blaze, Deputy Mayor Shepley.
Madam Mayor. Well, I know parking's not a discussion that we're having today as far as any decision making. I think it would probably be in your best interest to add parking, so I can see just from looking at there's room. And I think if you're renting them out, you'll probably have a lot less headaches if you have extra parking for your tenants. Because I think that I can see it being an issue with them getting in and out possibly. I mean, I don't see it a requirement for me to stop any. I like the idea, I like what you're doing. But I mean, that would be my only comment for you guys is you'd probably be in your best interest to figure a way to add an extra, just so they're not having to move to get around one another. And I too have parking in front of my house. That's part of living in town. That part of it, there's no stopping that. But I can see you got room, and I think it'd be a great idea if you did, but as it stands, I'd support it.
I do have a question, and maybe nobody in this room can answer it. How far are we doing? Okay. How far are we doing Irwin? When we redo Irwin, are we doing it down to this part? Councilor McGuire Blaze?
Up to the Arner Town line, it does not extend further.
Solves the curb and gutter problem. There's not going to be any curb and gutters on this road because curb and gutters complicate street parking. I think in theory, we're taking one house and going to 8 dwellings. Like that's exactly what we need. If we can address some of the parking concerns from the neighborhood, I think that's a big deal. 223 Talbot is absolutely beautiful. Like I think it's ideal. And we have another one over by the ELK office by the that the Brockmans did, Medora, and it's nice too. It's the same type of housing that we need because it's building houses. The day of single detached homes are going to be the day of the past. Like people can't afford to buy them. People can't afford to live in them. Any other? Director, we'll go Director Chadwick and then Councillor Guerin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just as a heads up to council, the last term of council directed administration to review parking requirements in the zoning bylaw for multi-residential types of development, meaning the Weston apartments or even the smaller kind of version, 10 units, for example. What we did is we went above and beyond and we actually reviewed the parking requirements, not only for multi-residential complexes, but also for singles, semis, and towns. We have just completed our internal review of that report and we'll be presenting council with some information. It's for not decision-making. We want council to kind of digest it on August 14th for information. And we would encourage you to think about it. And if you feel that after seeing best practices, after seeing, what are our lower tier neighbors doing as well in terms of parking requirements, and then you can direct us, hey, you know what, we want to increase or we want to prohibit, certain matters. So on August 14th, you'll hear some more information, but I just wanted you guys to be aware that this is coming. We have heard loud and clear from council on those concerns overall, not just related to multi-residential. Thank you.
Your planner, Ms. Chason, before we go to Councillor Guerin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to alert you that our applicants would like to have an opportunity to speak to a couple of the items that were raised. Thanks.
Guerin?
I'd like to hear from them first, and then I'll comment.
All right, make your way back to the delegation podium and press the mic.
Hey, first of all, I want to say thank you to the council for listening and coming in on a special meeting, and thank you to the mayor for Greg Iserman. And I am the delegate for our family little partnership that owns the property. I also want to thank Corrine for guiding us as we're new to this kind of a thing. So she's done a great job helping us. So one of the things that Scott brought up, and thank you to Scott, he's been a great neighbor so far already, helping just offering drawings and such. So he brought up 223 Talbot Street, and that is what we want to mimic. And I guess one of the oversights that I had done is in the hustle and bustle of trying to get all this moving is I didn't look at the width of their driveway. So I would have had that put on, and our goal would be to utilize as much front space as we can for parking. And now when Corrine said that, actually in her presentation, I kind of went, crap, I I wish I would have thought of that, it would have been on the drawing. So to alleviate any other fears, we will go as wide as we can with the parking. So that's all that I wanted to add, that we hear it loud and clear, and we'll remedy that.
Aaron, then Counselor Allard.
Thank you, through you to Director Chadwick. So really what's being asked, because they meet all of they're checking the boxes on a lot of the parking that based on our existing bylaws. So really the ask is the change in the zoning, right? To permit the semi-detached dwellings in the residential R11 zoning, is that right? Okay, so with that being said, could council make a decision to permit that with the exception or with the added that they'd have to add more parking? Could we do that? Could we say on the 14th, we'll accept it, but they have to increase parking 6 spaces?
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. So, Councillor Guerin, the requirement that a council can impose on any applicant is written in your zoning bylaw. So unfortunately, you would not be able to impose anything above and beyond. That's not to say that it wouldn't be out of the ordinary to encourage, as I believe Deputy Mayor Shepley had indicated earlier, as an offering, but it would not be able to be required. That's only set forward in the zoning bylaw.
Yeah, okay, so through you further. So my concern is with that, we're still approving it based on all these assumptions. We're looking at parking, we're looking at, even though it fits, in some of our minds, some of us don't understand what adequate really is. Is that 1 space? Is it 1.25? Is it 1? Is it 2? Everyone has a different idea of what adequate parking is. So I'm just wondering on the 14th if we're going to get to a point where I'm saying no, just because I don't like the fact that I don't like the parking and we can't put the cart ahead of the horse. We have to deal with one before the other. I think when they put the sidewalk in on Irwin, the road's already too narrow. They put the sidewalk in and that was a change on Irwin. It's really made it a lot smaller. If anyone does want to park, I haven't seen anyone yet park on the sidewalk side. I have a couple of friends that live down there and I visit them, except for maybe the one household that Mr. Brady's talking about. I mean, other than that, most of them, the lots are so deep, you don't really need to have parking on the street. But I get the concern about adding those extra units, and if they do have to have overflow in the street, I think it's a concern at that corner. So I think you really got to go drive down there and take a look at it. It's extremely narrow. The way the parking is laid out right now, I don't see how, like I wouldn't live downstairs and park and be told to have to move my car every time somebody has to get out. I mean, the way it's laid out right now, I don't think it's, but we have no control over that because he meets the parking. And if we agree on the 14th to go ahead and do it, he can do it the way he's doing it right now. I want to make sure that everyone's aware of that. And I want to make sure that was the case. So yeah, I mean, I love the idea of the type of development he wants to do. I have concerns about the parking, even though it does meet our requirements.
Allard?
I have one question on the sidewalk down Irwin. Which side is it on, and is the parking located where the sidewalk is at? I think that parking is going to be a problem. Like Councillor Guerin said, you got one guy in the garage, you've got to get 2 other people to move. It just seems like a hassle, but that's their complaint, not ours. But I think that the sidewalk, if it's on that side of the street, does it cut off the parking?
Director Chadwick?
Hey, Rondi. So, Councillor Allard, the sidewalk is on the north side of Irwin. It is within the right-of-way, the municipal right-of-way. It does not encroach into private property, but there is still a width between the property line and the edge of the sidewalk that could be considered the shoulder or could be considered extra space for another parking or another parking spot.
Thanks again. Just one final comment. I appreciate that you got up and said that, and you obviously recognize what we're all seeing, and I think that while you probably we can't force it on you, I think it's great, and I think it's in your best interest to do exactly what you said. I think and neighborly, it probably go a long ways for neighbor relations as well. But I think in the long run, for your tenants, if you're the landlord, it's a headache that you're going to solve for yourself right off the bat. So I appreciate that and thank you for the comments.
From members of council. Counselor Hammond, then Counselor Garrett.
Word of encouragement there, regarding your garage door height. You might, make sure that it's tall enough to accommodate today's pickup trucks. Thank you.
Yeah, through the mayor, can I get confirmation again? These aren't going to be rentals, they're actually selling the units, correct?
Okay, so I do want to find out what we have to say about our parking bylaw on the 14th. I think that that's going to be a game changer. It came up during Weston Apartments and Weston Apartments, the Ready Bake, yes. And so when we were approving that, it was kind of like, okay, like this really isn't adequate, although a lot of people there park on the street when they really should park in the parking lot. But is there a way, like, I don't know if you could see that, is there a way to have like two? Another thing is a lot of people don't always park in the garage because they fill the garage with stuff. So it's almost like you can, people do, like, how many people put stuff in the garage? People have bikes, people have lawnmowers. So I'm wondering if there's a way, say we even count the garage parking, can you get like this many parking spots? Okay. Okay, so when you come back at the next meeting, is there a way you could, and I know it's totally the ball's in your court, but as you could see, majority of us here do have some comments and questions. Is there a way you can bring us a modified site plan? Okay. Any other comments from members? Director Chadwick.
Mayor Bondi, you reminded me about something. So the second, or what we could consider the additional dwelling unit, can't say second because there could be potentially a third in this world, but the additional dwelling unit in our zoning bylaw currently requires one parking space. So in other municipalities, we've seen a trend where a dwelling unit requires, the main dwelling unit requires maybe two, but the additional dwelling unit does not require any parking. So we're no forward or ahead than our, neighbor being another one of our municipalities. So again, if the main dwelling unit requirement goes up, then we would need to maintain, unless you direct us otherwise, because our current bylaw says one additional parking space for each additional unit. Food for thought and more to come on the 14th.
Deputy Mayor Shepley.
Madam Mayor, just a question for Director Chadwick. So the parking is not an issue for us to even consider at the next meeting, really. I mean, that's not something for us to even, it's great that we're willing to to do what we're asking, even though they don't have to. I don't think it's something that they need to do. It's not something that we can change at this time until we revisit that. And this is applications before that. So I think it's very important that we don't make that an issue here when we're making this decision, because it really is not an issue for us to consider going forward. Until we have that bylaw changed, we can't look ahead to what we're possibly going to do. We have to do with what's in front of us today. So I think it's very important that we all understand that as well going forward. That's it. Thank you.
Along on that, council of the day saw issues with the parking and we gave direction for administration to fix the parking, which has taken some time because things do take time. So we wanted to rectify the parking situations because when there's parking complaints, guess who people are going to call? They're going to call us, right? So we gave direction to fix the parking. It's not fixed in time before more applications. So in theory, we could have had a moratorium on development, not saying I want to, just saying we could have had a pause until we had more. So that was fixed because we realized there's a problem. On Victor Street, there's a sixplex. I know we're not talking about that, but that's going to come along with parking concerns too. But I think if we can get some tweaks with the parking, I think it sounds like it's a great fix. Anything else? Before we motion to receive the presentation from Corinne Chason and receive the presentation from our delegates. We'll do it all at once. Can we do it all at once? We're doing it all at once. Deputy Mayor Shepley, Councillor Verbeek, any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? And a motion to adjourn. Counselor Garen, Counselor Allard, all in favor?